Okay, Magali, please, our coordinator, is yours.
Thank you, Marvin. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to be there with us this afternoon. I am very happy to welcome you for this roundtable on how to design a gender-sensitive culture. We built this meeting according to what we did in the Gender Smart project, but also in the Super Sister project, and we included also the experience of inclusive corporate culture from the point of view of a private company, the Dell computer company, who has expertise in the domain and who is also supporting the project as an external advisory member. We focused this roundtable on the nuts and bolts, the tips, the recommendations, and the lessons learned of what is needed to succeed in designing a gender-sensitive culture in your institution. We will share what we did and how we did it to provide you with some new and concrete insights into how to yourself build a gender-sensitive culture later on. Before starting, in few words, the Gender Smart project started 2 years ago in January 2019. The consortium includes a partner from all Europe. It includes 7 implementing partners, research organization, universities, and funding organization too, and the expertise of 2 technical partners. The consortium is field specific, focused on agricultural development and life sciences. For further information, please see our website. To begin the roundtable, first, what is a gender-sensitive corporate culture? The corporate culture relies on gender values and daily gender-sensitive behaviors and practices, on inclusive communication, etc., to make the institution environment gender-friendly, enabling to achieve equality. In the project, we consider it as a pillar for sustainable changes toward gender equality and integration of gender in content. But in fact, how concretely build it, the objective of the meeting is to share our experience on that. Each implementing partner built its own gender equality plan, which included specific action on gender-sensitive culture. But it is not the easiest aspect of gender equality plan. And in the Gender Smart and Super projects, we experimented tools, we produced outputs, and we would like to share the lessons that we learned and the key aspects with you. As we saw that they are not so widely disseminated and not so easy to reach. Thus, the roundtable is not a recipe for a gender-sensitive culture in research organization, but I hope that it will give you a practical illustration, and I hope it will be useful for you too. So I will stop here. I wish you a very fruitful roundtable. I will now give the floor to Panayota, who will facilitate the exchanges. And join the meeting, and Panayota, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Magali. Hi everyone. I would also like to welcome you here today. Thank you for being here. My name is Panayota Policarpou, and I am the program manager for Gender Smart project at the Cyprus University of Technology. It's my honor to be among these talented and experienced speakers here today. So as Magali said, today our main goal is to provide to you our experience, to share with you the tips and lessons learned throughout that experience. And of course, we couldn't do that without the sister projects and representatives from the private sector that will elaborate more specific on their progress. So I would like to briefly present our main speakers today so we can start with our discussion. So today here with us, we have Jane Kavanagh, the head of research operations at Chaskisk in Ireland. She's also the project manager of Gender Smart project. She's the project manager, one of the partners of Gender Smart, Chaskisk. And we have Stéphane Rebou, representing Dell from France. As Magali said, He's also a member of the External Advisor Committee of the Gender Smart project. Stefan is the Vice President of Sales of Mid-Market across international markets in Dell. Stefan, thank you so much for your time and welcome. We have with us Esther Coes. Esther is Assistant Professor in Sociology at the Department of Political and Social Sciences, representing today the University of Cagliari and Supera project. Esther, thank you so much for your time. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Cindy von Hifte from CIRAD, France, representing Gender Smart project. She's the Gender Equality Officer. CIRAD is one of the partners of Gender Smart. Thank you so much for your time, Cindy. So without further delay, I would like to briefly explain to you how the session will go today, and then we can start with our discussion. So we have 2 rounds, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. And during each round, each presenter will have 5 minutes to provide information and share their experience. And starting with the first round, the speakers will share their experience on how to build a gender culture and how they did that, or they're doing that in their organization. They will provide us actions they may have taken, what's instrumental in their implementation, and then we will hear from them in the second round about their the challenges and resistance they may have faced, but also we would like to hear their personal reflection in that process. So without further delay, we had a floor, Jane, that will be yours. So let's start.
Okay, thank you very much, Panayota, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to share my screen. I have a short presentation. Hang on, yeah. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. So over the next few minutes, I would like to outline the approach that Teagasc has taken to develop its gender equality values as part of the Gender Smart project. But firstly, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the organisation that I work for, Teagasc. So Teagasc is the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority, which provides advisory and extension services to farmer clients. We also provide agricultural education, and we conduct research on all aspects of agriculture and food. We have advisory offices, agricultural colleges and research centres right across Ireland, and we have almost 1,300 staff in total. And when you look at the overall figures, we are almost gender balanced with 44% female staff and 56% male. However, when you look a little bit more closely, particularly at the senior grades across the organisation that are shown here in red, you'll see that there are significant gender imbalances. 83% of all senior staff in Teagasc are male, and within research, 81% of senior staff are male. Within advisory and education, we have 92% of senior staff are male. And then even though 92% of our admin staff are female, at the senior grades, 80% are male. So you'll see here that we have some work to do in terms of achieving gender equality. And Teagasc embarked on its gender equality journey about 3 years ago, and participating in the Gender Smart project has given us the motivation, the resources, the access to capabilities to be able to enable us to make progress on our journey. And one of the first tasks that we had to do as part of the Gender Smart project was to audit and develop gender equality values. And this activity has really set the direction for the development of our gender equality plan and our culture. So to do this, we organised 2 internal workshops, and we developed a participatory approach to design and develop gender equality core values and behavioural statements. And that approach was shared with all the partners that are involved in Gender Smart. So we started by conducting a brief stakeholder analysis to identify the key influencers and power holders within Teagasc, and to identify senior and middle managers to invite to the workshop to develop the values. During the workshop, then, we gave participants a brief overview of the Gender Smart project, And the first activity that we asked them to do was to examine the culture within Teagasc, using the cultural web, which is shown here on the slide. The cultural web, which was developed by Johnson, Whittington and Scholes, is a tool to analyse and understand an organisation's culture and to show the behavioural, physical and symbolic manifestations of the culture. Culture, as we know, is influenced by many factors, including the history of the organisation, societal culture, the structure of power and control, and the vision and mission of the organisation. And it can manifest itself in a number of ways through different channels, such as symbols, heroes, rituals, practices, and values, which are visible to people in the organisation. So what we did was we gave the participants a blank template of the cultural web and a set of guiding questions. And we asked each group of participants in our workshop to consider each of the 7 elements of the cultural web from their perspective and also from their experience, and to consider then each element also from a gender perspective. So this led to a really interesting discussion on the culture within Teagasc. And understanding how culture is created and reinforced can help us to predict the impact of change programs and its effect on strategy. So this discussion on our culture helped us to identify potential challenges and as well as opportunities for gender equality within Teagasc. The second part of the workshop then focused on developing the gender equality values. So in groups, we asked the participants to brainstorm answers to the question that we have here on the screen. So in the context of our organisational culture, what does gender equality mean for Teagasc? And at the end of the workshop, 8 potential gender equality values and associated behavioural statements were identified. We then held a second participatory workshop with senior and middle management representatives, and some of those had attended the first workshop, and we also brought in some new participants for the second workshop. And again, to increase the awareness of the project, we gave them an overview of the Gender Smart project. And then we asked them to vote and rank the top 3 values from the list of 8 that we had identified at the first workshop. So when we had agreement on the top 3 values, we used another participatory tool, the Lotus Blossom technique, which we had learned as part of our Gender Smart training, to identify actions to implement each of the values. And we've incorporated these actions subsequently in our gender equality plan. And taking this approach has increased awareness of the project and gender equality amongst our middle and senior managers across the organisation. And for us, these people are really key to mobilising and championing change. So these are the gender equality values and the behavioural statements that we developed from this process for Teagasc. So the first one is equal opportunities, where we will ensure that everyone in Teagasc will have equal opportunities to achieve their potential. No barriers, where we will ensure that there are no barriers to achieving gender equality within the organisation. And active inclusion, where we will actively ensure that all voices in the organisation are heard and that staff are empowered to share their views and ideas. So these values have set the direction and they guide our gender equality plan. And we've actually just developed a logo for these values, which I've shown here in the bottom right of the slide, which we are going to include on all our corporate documents, our website, our recruitment materials as well. And we'll begin to roll them out and communicate them widely across the organisation in the next few months. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of how we have embarked on starting our gender equality culture by developing gender equality values. So I'll hand it back to you, Pan.
Great, thank you so much, Jane. That was really insightful. Before moving on, does any of the other speakers would like to ask anything now? So can Jane elaborate more on this before we move to our next speaker? Okay, so now I would like to give the floor to Stefan. Stefan, if you would like also to briefly share your position at Dell and your perspective from gender, and then please feel free to go deeper to your discussion. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jutta. And very interesting actually to speak right after Jane, because you will see that the approach I would describe is very complementary to what Jane described on her own experience. What I'm going to talk about is actually the way we have developed over years an approach that we call MARC, Men Advocating Real Change, within Dell, especially across EMEA, but globally across Dell technologies. But in EMEA, this is where we had actually most traction with this initiative. I'm talking about Dell Technology, which is a massive technology company of 90 billion revenue annually, spanning across more than 180 countries. So we are talking about an international private high-tech company that it's a really face all those diversity and inclusion kind of challenges from different culture, from different countries, and so on. My position within Dell is that I lead a segment of business across international, which are all countries outside of Northern America. Okay, and I'm working with Dell for now 18 years, based here in the south of France, in Montpellier, and having been engaged with say all those countries throughout this period with Dell. And as I said, this initiative has been built over probably the last 10 years within Dell. It's initiated with a kind of management focus on how do we further break this kind of glass ceiling that we saw on the gender development, okay, and especially on this, say, glass ceiling for women in the career development that were struggling to get to those kind of direction, let's say, managerial levels and executive level and so on. And that's where we felt that there was a need for, let's say, educating men, especially, and now after 10 years, we changed this to turn it into many advocating change. So it's no longer men, but the initial intent was really to bring men with this approach and to change the managerial behavior, the managerial perception, okay, really to make resonate this wording that you certainly know, that diversity is a fact, okay, inclusion is an act. And the whole point of our approach was to educate those managers in a broad sense on what is diversity, why gender is important, but why all forms of diversity is important into an organization, okay? And in a performing organization, in an organization that can really, let's say, deliver the most out of the team member that we are able to gather and to mobilize. So that has been really the approach. And from an initial group of managers, we have built a group of ambassadors. We have more than 150 today across EMEA. We have built a complete training capability that we run on we run at least 2 or 3 sessions a week across EMEA. Okay, we have over the years, trained, think over the first year, 800 people, 1,500 after 2 years. I got the 3,000 year 3, and we have now more than 10,000 people across EMEA out of a population of probably 20,000. Okay, 100% of the managers, 100% of the executive have gone through this cascade. We actually retrain the people on a very regular basis, and it has become actually so built into our management style that it is now part of the, let's say, expectation for managers to drive in terms of conversation with their teams on a one-to-one basis, being comfortable enough to pick up on those behavior, on those remarks, on those, let's say, way of thinking that are not inclusive, that are not creating what we want to develop in the workplace, and I think in the society more broadly. Okay, so we have, let's say, built this initiative, and what is, I think, really important is that this initiative has been led by the business. Okay, I am a business manager. I have nothing to do with HR, with talent development or whatever. I have been the sponsor of this initiative for EMEA for nearly 5 years now. Okay, the different, say, other ambassadors are all coming from the business. They come from sales, from logistics, from supply, from finance, and every business unit is really, let's say, engaged to make a difference there. So that has been our approach in this in driving inclusion at the back of all those other programs that through HR and through people development have been driving the diversity from a recruitment, from a career development standpoint, and so on. And that's my my quick story.
Great. Thank you so much, Stefan, for sharing this, because as we always say, also at Gender Smart, gender equality is not women's issue. It affects everyone, and engaging men should be our priority. And I think tackling that point and integrating gender and as many of your strategies effective. Thank you so much for this. We'll come back to you soon. So please, Esther, we would like to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to share my presentation. Sorry. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It is a real pleasure for me to meet you all in this sort of face-to-face way and to be able to participate with you on behalf of the university that I represent in this roundtable. Thanks a lot to Gender Smart Sister Project for inviting me today. And so just a few words about the context and specifically the university and the project I am representing here. Okay. The University of Cagliari, which turns 400 years just this year, is a public state university with about 25,000 students and over 1,900 teaching and technical administrative staff. It is located in the island of Sardinia in Italy, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, and thanks to its geographic position, it has consolidated the relationship and exchanges with the southern Mediterranean countries at both students and staff levels. It is a multidisciplinary higher education institution which includes 6 faculties and 15 departments. It has been the first Italian university to implement the European qualification passport for refugees under the promotion of European Council. And I'm here today as a member of the core team of University of Cagliari as a partner since 2018 of the European project Supera, supporting the promotion of equality in research and academia, a 4-year project funded within the framework of the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme, which involves, as you can see, from the slide, 8 partners, and specifically other 3 partners that are universities from Spain, Portugal, Hungary, now Austria, the coordination of Yellow Window, and the support of an expert from CSPO, and 2 research funding organizations, the region of Sardinia and the Ministry of Economy, Industry and the Competitiveness in Spain. And these are the links to the contents of this project if you want to know something more about it. And this project is aimed at involving the University of Cagliari as a whole, just like the other international partners, in the construction and implementation of its gender equality plan as a completely new organizational tool. Thanks for our participation in Supera project, we drafted our first gender equality plan in the University of Cagliari, which was officially approved in July 2020. And this JEP is the unique operational tool for dealing with gender inequalities in all areas of research, education, vocational training. And it's a participatory planning tool aimed at involving all members of our university in promoting gender equality. It has been a collective construction process during 4 years, and through the adoption of this gender equality plan, the University of Cagliari wants to act as a strategic agent for promoting the European founding principle of gender equality in its dual role as an educational environment where to be socialized to fight inequalities and to apply the principles of an equal citizenship, and as a workplace characterized by various diversities that can result into risk of inequalities in the distribution of, for example, of positions and in career progression and so on. And the actions of our JEP pertain to 4 areas: the recruitment, the career progression, family work balance policies, horizontal and vertical segregation, Then leadership and decisional process, gender dimension in research and teaching, and the gender stereotypes, sexism, and sexual harassment. And these key areas of the SUPRA are related to three strategic areas of our university. Its regulation, its objective of training and guidance, and its communication strategies to the other partners. Within each key area, several actions have been identified and then specified into sub-actions that are useful for achieving its main objectives. For each action, we have defined the target of people directly and indirectly involved, the set of responsible actors in charge of the actual application of the measures, and the specific outcomes that we have expecting in terms of output and that express the transformative impact within the university. And in particular, the University of Cagliari is project leader for the area of communication strategies within SUPRA. And we think that these are the three main pillars of a good strategy to talk about and spread a gender-sensitive culture. The engagement, the participation, and the achievement of an effective ownership of the mission of a gender-sensitive change, both by internal stakeholders, for example, our Gender Equality Hub, and other key actors, and also external stakeholders, because the university is a key actor in the process of local development of our region, also with reference to the promotion of a better knowledge and a more sensitive gender equality cultural frame. These are just two recent examples of our activity in this field: an institutional video focused on how to deal with gender inequality in science and in general in the labor market, and a campaign for a gender-sensitive communication on social media in practice through a pilot experience with a group of students of the Communication Sciences course in our university, coordinated by Professor Alessandro Lovari, who is also a member of our core team. And the other slides are for the second round, so it's all for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. So we see also how universities, similar to other partners of Gender Smart, are involved and are important stakeholders in this process. So now our last speaker for the first round, Cindy, the floor is yours. Cindy, can you hear us?
Yes, okay, I had some trouble with getting my mic on, sorry.
Okay.
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for your interest in the seminar. So just before starting, a quick word on SARAT. So SARAT is a French agriculture research and international cooperation organization. So we are working for the sustainable development of tropical and Mediterranean regions. We are present in some 50 countries around the world, and we have a staff from around 1,650 people, and half of them are scientists. So as to our corporate culture, we can say that our corporate culture is mainly influenced by our mission. So we have a mission to conduct agriculture research for development purposes, which means that we are really present in areas where we are most needed and areas which are quite difficult and have challenges that we have to focus on. And so historically, this means that we have been recruiting mainly male agriculture engineers because we considered men for being more suitable for exposing themselves to these challenging contexts. Another feature of our corporate culture is that we have noticed the presence of the classic societal gender stereotypes, which cause bias and lead to inequalities. And to illustrate this, we can say that we noted the following numerary and professional inequalities. Overall, we can say that we almost have a gender balance in our population. So we have about 54% men, 46% women. But if we have a closer look at the jobs, and I think we have a bit the same situation as Chagask was mentioning, we can see that we have an imbalance in science with less women being underrepresented, and that we have the opposite situation when we look at support functions. So support functions being typically human resources, also communication, areas like that. Things are improving in science. We are recruiting more and more women, but we do still focus a major difficulty in getting men into support functions. We have about only 25% of men who are candidates in our support functions. If we look a bit more at the professional inequalities, so professional inequalities is that we see that we have differing career paths according to the gender of the persons. A first illustration of this is management. We have 71% of the managerial positions are being taken on by men. And we can take here the assumption that this can be linked to stereotypes that we may have, and that we will associate leadership much more easy and more often with men for masculine characteristics such as assertiveness, decisiveness, competitiveness, flexibility, availability. Another illustration of professional inequalities is the part-time work. We really see that it's much more challenging for women to have a good work-life balance. And here we see, for instance, that in the population of our part-time workers, it are the women who are the major share. They represent 70% of our part-time workers. And just to end, just a word as well on our expatriation, which is an important feature in CIRAD. We see here that women are much less represented than men in the countries where CIRAD is working. So if we, and also we can also say that we have noticed the existence of ordinary sexism. We did a cartoon poll, and in this cartoon poll, there were 85% of the women respondents said that they had been featuring or have had remarks, that they had been interrupted during meetings, or that their ideas have been taken up by others in the meetings. So we can, in a nutshell, we can say that our corporate culture is marked by a research performance model, which values presenteeism, hyperconnectivity. We have so long and flexible hours. We have to be present all the time due to the different time zone differences. Geographical mobility, which is a contractual clause for researchers. So we cannot, researchers, it's very difficult for them to refuse to go in foreign countries. And so we can say that this is a gendered performance model, and that it is beneficiary for full-time working people, people who are geographical mobile. And so if we look at this, most often men are the ones who suit to this model more than women. So our engagement for gender equality is that we want to promote a culture which allows everyone to thrive in their job. And we really want to promote diversity and inclusion as a collective and an individual strength. So for building this corporate culture, and for having a corporate culture that is characterized by diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have been putting in place different actions. First of all, we have been doing quite some analysis. We have run in 2016 an institutional survey, which helped us to get some data for having a corporate agreement for gender equality. And this survey was then onwards completed in 2019, thanks to the Gender Smart Audit. And on the picture, you will see some people who are participating to the cartoon poll that we did, and where we asked people whether the situations that were represented by the cartoon, whether they think that this situation, this professional situation, is present in CIRAD or not. Another type of actions is the definition of gender equality values and inclusive behaviors. And really, we see this as the backbone of inducing cultural change. We see this really as one of our major activities to drive institutional change. Then we also did training, and I really listened carefully to what what Stefan was mentioning about the importance of training and getting everyone trained. We have been training our top management, but we are still, we have not trained that much our middle management, and that's really a shortcoming. And then we also have been running activities for awareness raising and communication. So we have, for instance, a cycle of seminars, Let's Discuss Gender, so where we discuss on different gender topics. And we also have we will soon have a charter for inclusive communication. But if I'm focusing now on defining gender equality specific values and behaviors, let's say that we departed from the guidelines that our partner Chagask has provided us with the Web of Culture, but we try to tailor made it to our own institutional culture and our way of functioning. So we started with, so it was a whole process which started in June 2019 and which lasted until the end of 2020. So it is a process that takes time. We started first with a management values workshop. So we got together our middle and top managers in June, and we discussed with them, okay, what does gender equality mean to you? What does gender equality mean for you in the particular context we are working in at CERAD? And how do the CERAD generic values, how do they contribute or how do they respect gender equality? So this was the first workshop where we had about 51 participants. Then we kind of designed another type of values workshops, but this time this was targeted to all personnel. Everybody was welcome to participate to this type of workshops. We have organized 25 workshops from October 2019 to March 2020. We organized it in Montpellier, where we are based, but also in our overseas departments. We had about 213 participants. And then we decided to also complete the results of these values workshops with a questionnaire. So also to include the expats. And maybe just to say another word on a thing on the multi-stakeholder values workshops, just to say that we did this, likewise, Chagask, we did this with rounds of brainstorming. We had 2 rounds of brainstorming. We first asked people to define aspirational statements. So to really define, ask them, what are the values, gender equality values, to which you think we should evolve, and how can we express them, how can we make them more explicit by defining behaviors. In these workshops, we really had very pleasant and relaxed atmosphere. We asked people not to present them by their hierarchical position, but just by their first name. And this type of very simple things made it very an interesting tool, an interesting workshop. So other than the questionnaire, once we had these outputs of the workshop, the questionnaire, we did an analysis of the data, and we kind of counted the occurrence of the values. And so we saw that we selected 7 values out of 9, which were constantly which constantly came back in the different workshops. And for each, we kind of defined or selected 2 to 3 behaviors. So we have a total of 7 values and 15 behaviors. Then we validated this with our board of directors in October 2020. And then we kind of made a guide of these values and behaviors. And we launched this guide through a dedicated 7-month campaign that we started in December. We have interviews, we have a motion design of our guide. We did also publications in intranet. And so now this guide is present on our websites, and we kind of continue for institutionalizing this guide and make it used by everyone. So since January 2021, we organize discussion groups. So we invite people to come and to discuss per value on what we could do as a good practice, each in its own job, to make these inclusive behaviors a reality. We have also collected baseline data. We asked people in our company to evaluate themselves on their individual behaviors. And we intend to complete this by the perceptions that people may have of the inclusiveness of our institutional functioning. And so now the next steps is that we want to integrate the values in all employee-related operational processes. We also want to involve and work much more with the middle management on this guide, but this is one of the lack that we have in our approach. And we are currently already institutionalizing and widening up this dynamic by collaborating more and more with a strategic priority that we have in CERAD, and that is to work towards a corporate social responsibility, which takes back environmental but also social issues. Thank you for your attention. I give you the floor back, Dan.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was really insightful, and thank you for walking us through the process. It was really clear to see your steps and the process you made. So we're now open to questions. We have already some in the group. I will start, and please feel free to add more. So we have question from Xenia or Jane for the first presentation. Don't you think that the non-senior 80% of admin staff and 50% of non-senior academic staff will grow up to the senior position eventually, while senior staff heading from retirement? How the age groups are distributed? Jane?
Hi, Pan. Yeah, so I see the question there. So what we've started to do, because we're quite conscious of the figures, is that for each of our recruitment positions now, we monitor and track all of the figures from the number of applicants, and we break it down by male and female and shortlisting as well, and those that are called for interview, and then those that are panelled. And a report is sent to our board every month. And we're also recording these figures as well in our end of year review, and also an annual presentation is made to the board on our gender equality figures. So yeah, there will be some positions where females can move into, but because of the nature of our organisation, there's very low turnover of staff. So unless new positions are created, the opportunities are quite limited.
And from our experience, I think what is being a pattern that is being for years, we see that having more female in the middle management or at the beginning of the management doesn't necessarily mean that when we go higher, when we go to top management position, that will eventually happen, because as we see, we have the barriers, unconscious bias, the glass ceiling, that it's there and it prevents their promotion.
Yeah, you see, Panayota, I think typically on that, I think that's one of the actions that we took at Dell, to actually always prepare a pipeline of female candidates for any kind of executive position. And typically to prepare those candidates for being able to bridge that gap. Because to your point, and I think what Jane actually mentioned as well, there are perceptions, there are, let's say, lack of connection. There are plenty of things that maybe men will do more naturally by the community of men and so on, but that you need to overcome. And you can't do that just at the last minute when the recruitment has to happen. If it didn't start actually a few months or years before, those persons will not get access to the community, will not get the recognition, will not get the kind of seniority to be then in a position to be a candidate and let's say a credible candidate for that position. So it's also super important to work, let's say, in advance to create this pipeline. And whether there is turnover or not, I think it is a matter of, let's say, preparing the talents for those opportunities.
Exactly, it's a process that you have to in advance, not in last minute when the decision is being taken, but you build the culture. And something that I found really interesting is when Cindy presented that gender performing model that proves that we have to rethink our processes, not only when we decided, but we see that the performing system has also biases, and we tackle exactly where the bias can enter. Great, so let's see for another question. Okay, we have many things for the Untitled presentation. The Gender Smart Audit was conducted by an outside actor to all speakers. What are the internal resources actually dedicated to the setting up and implementation of this project in your respective organizations? Just to have an idea on the actual commitment investment from your respective organizations. So I would like to start with Jane, and maybe all of you can answer this question.
Yeah, so resources are probably one of the biggest challenges that we have within the organisation in terms of being able to dedicate it towards gender equality. We conducted the audit internally ourselves. We have created a small project team within the organisation that has 3 core people on it. So there's myself, Laurie O'Donnell, and also our head of HR, Valerie Farrell. And I suppose with that small team, we kind of do most of the work in terms of the gender smart, the developing the gender, setting up the workshops. But alongside that, we have set up a task force, which consists of 14 representatives from middle and senior managers right across our organization. And they act almost like our sounding board and our steering group, but also the champions of change within the organization. So any of the projects or the activities that we develop, we would run it by them. And that's how we've kind of tried to mobilize the middle and senior managers, and also to maintain that top management support.
Of course. Great. Stefan?
Yes, Panayota.
So the question was, what are the internal resources actually dedicated to the setting up and implementation?
Oh, you mean the same question. We had a few internal resources coming from HR to help initially, but what was, and I think it was part of the beauty of the approach, is most of the work has been performed by volunteers, i.e. people that are, say, business managers that have a day-to-day job and that took on this kind of extra load to drive this initiative. So I drive a core team of a dozen of people that meets every week for an hour, okay, to review how we cascade, we break down. I have a volunteer who acts as a program manager that probably spend a few hours a week actually to coordinate actions and so on. We have created groups of volunteers in each of our main sites across EMEA, where we have volunteers to cascade, to run conversation, to actually, let's say, drive the initiative. So it has been, let's say, very much based on volunteering, but it makes it also a very authentic approach, because everybody that is participating is really fully motivated with a real kind of passion for the topic, and people don't do it just because it's a tick in the box exercise. It is really because they believe and they see actually the impact they can provide on the organization.
Great. Thank you for this, Stefan. Esther?
Okay, this is a sore point, a challenge, because in the university we have various tools that deal with the issue of gender equality, like the gender budget or the plan of positive actions. But to give sustainability to a tool like the gender equality plan, even after the end of the project, in our case, Supra project, it would require dedicated human and economic resources. And one proposal at the moment is to ask the Ministry of University and Research to dedicate specific items for Italian university from the Recovery Fund, because this is a great opportunity in this very moment, because having a gender equality plan has become an eligibility criterion for accessing European funding starting from 2022 for the Horizon and ERC programs. Therefore, investing in research has become urgent and necessary at the moment.
Exactly. And when we talk about change under such projects as Gender Smart and Superior, we talk about sustainable sustainable change. I'm sorry. Yeah. That means that we have to make sure that the policies, the strategies, the culture stays after the projects end. Great.
Well, yeah, I'll be a bit controversial there, if I may. I mean, to this. I mean, I fully understand that, I mean, with dedicated resources, you can really scale and you can really drive and so on. But to the point of sustainability, I think for me, the fact that you need some dedicated person, I mean, prove that it's not fully, let's say, embodied and loaded into the culture. I think the ambition should be, I mean, same as, let me say, an organization that is gender sensitive, it should be that gender should not be a discussion any longer, okay? The fact that a culture that is ready should be that it doesn't require anybody because everybody has it, okay? So while I fully understand the needs to keep the traction and so on, and don't get me wrong, I'm all with you on that, I think the ambition should be that we should not need it. Okay, because that should be the proof that it is now really, how to say, owned by everybody.
Absolutely.
Any comments on that? Any other from the speaker would like to comment on Stefan's, because this is a really interesting perspective, because we see that culture is it's already applied, and people, we don't need that Panayota or Jane or Magali in the organization anymore. Okay, and Cindy, would you like to add?
We need them, but for doing other things. Okay, we have other sides. Okay, so
I would say in an ideal world, yes, we really shouldn't be there. But in practice, it is time consuming, and it's energy and time consuming, I would say. So I think if you see out of the audits that there are problematics, then you have to put the resources to make things evolve. But hoping that indeed that once we get through the quota things, the revised procedures, etc., that things become just normal and embedded in the culture, and that we don't need to spend any energy anymore on that. But with Magali, when we started the Gender Smart project, we did information sessions. We started with information sessions, and we asked for, we did this kind of call for candidatures. We asked people, we said, okay, we want to organize this project by appointing leaders per work package. We want to work with teams of male, female, if possible, per work package. And we described profiles, and we just asked people who is interested. We ask for you to do this, to dedicate 10% of your time to work with us. So this is how we composed our core team. And today our core team is so we have 7 work packages. So we're around 14 people, but plus people who are taking on transversal roles. So we can say that we are about 20 people who are really well identified as working in the Gender Smart core team. Our human resources department is very well presented. And we meet once a month with these operational steering committees. We also have every 3 months we meet with top management, where we are meeting with the director of human resources and with our number 2, if the director of all type of resources we have at Sarat, and as well Magali as representing the scientific strategy and partnership aspects. Mm-hmm. And so what we underestimated is the need for communication resources. This is something we didn't budget for, and it is so important to be present, to answer, to communicate, to raise awareness. And so this is something we completely underestimated. We asked for some regional additional funds, so we kind of managed to have some funds, to have posters, etc. But this is something we completely underestimated. And we also still hope to raise the percentage of men. We have about 30% of men that come to our meetings, but they're always the same people. So that we see as well. And what we try now is extend our core team to have more like what I think at Endel you call ambassadors. We really would like to have more this second sphere of change agents who are voluntaries and who are working close to the research teams. But this is something some research teams already appointed some people who are gender contacts. But yeah, we still have to work on this and reflect more intensively on this.
Great, that's important point regarding that communication, which we usually always underestimate. Cindy, there was a question for you regarding the 2016 Gender Inequality Survey that you mentioned in your presentation. The question is whether this is available to the public.
No, that this was an internal, and it was even a free text survey. So we really wanted people to express them in a really, let's say, spontaneous way. So it was anonymous, and this is really, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I would appreciate if someone who is not who would not like to make any comment, if you could please mute your microphone so we don't have echo. Thank you. So moving forward to some questions, we have more 2 minutes for the Q&A. I'd like to know who is driving the process for developing the organization's sensitiveness on gender issues. Are there only gender experts, or the process involve expertise from other disciplines domains? I think that was for Sirat presentation.
So in Sirat, we didn't have any gender expertise there are two axes. There's everything which regards human resources and the institutional functioning. And there we don't have really gender experts. So it's an expertise that we have been building up thanks to the Gender Smart project and thanks to the technical partners that we have in our consortium, Gender Smart and ISIS. So at the start of the project, we had multiple thematic workshops, multiple trainings. And so we gradually have built this up. So me, myself, as a gender equality officer, I'm not an expert at all. I was more recruited as an expert in project management. And so gradually we are kind of building this up. On the other side, the second X is research, because we also want to get gender considerations into research, into our research project formulation, the methods, the ways of collecting data, the way of disseminating results. And there do have already some gender expertise, but this expertise was not visible. We had a problem of visibility. And we had about only less than 1% of publications which mentioned gender. And we formulated the hypothesis that there is some gender expertise. There's lots more that we think that there is, but it is not visible. And so now we have a kind of community of practices, which is being led by two of our colleagues, Emmanuel Bouquet and Jean-Michel, I'm forgetting his last name, Suissou, Jean-Michel, who have really built up in a voluntary way as well, a whole group, a whole team of people who are sharing tools to also work on getting gender into research.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Esther, there's a question from Lutz for you. Don't you think the ministry should also invest in capacity building for structural change across the universities through co-creation and participatory methods, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. It's an excellent consideration and suggestion. Also because for the JEP to truly become a tool for change, it must promote but also be increasingly inserted into a well-initiated organizational and cultural change that also goes beyond the limits of the university, which is also an agent of education and development more generally for the territory to which it is addressed. Therefore, it is an interest of the ministry, I hope, to invest from this point of view also for a political objective of local development, because gender equality is also, again, in terms of economic and social vitality and productivity with an improvement in general well-being. So this is an excellent suggestion, and we ask the ministry to take into consideration this suggestion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Esther. Branka, would you like to make a question? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm from Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Novi Sad, and I have no question, but I just would like to stress a few facts regarding inclusiveness and participation of women in management positions. I put in chat some activities and conclusions of our RRI group at Faculty of Agriculture, but one very important outcome of our activities is actually conclusion. You know, very often ladies are not interested in management positions. They're simply not interested. And there is no glass ceiling. I mean, in that case, it's very difficult to assess glass ceiling. I can tell you from my personal experience and my talks with my colleagues, because if you apply for management position, it assumes a lot of time invested in this position, in your activities. It means you have less time for science and education, which you would like to conduct. So we simply try to manage our time on different way. So we have that kind of situation that simply my female colleagues are not interested to submit a proposal for let's say, the position of department manager or dean. Even we have 50% of women at faculty, and whole process of dean election and all management positions are completely transparent. So and there is blind voting. So, I mean, with 50% of women, it's not a problem to have 50% of votes if you would like, but we simply do not have female candidates. So, in speaking about high positions, maybe we should take into account this possibility too.
If I may just react on that, I think these kind of cases certainly can happen. Okay, what we've seen when we put together those programs to help women to accelerate, but especially to broaden actually the set of opportunity for their career development, we've seen actually this kind of behavior changing throughout the program, and lots of person that initially entered into the program saying, I would never be a manager. Why should I be a manager? It's no interest for that, or actually changed their point of view because they also understood different what being a manager can be. And actually they understood that they could be other kind of manager than the manager that they tend to see in the business. So while I don't dispute the fact that everybody has interest and so on, I think there is also a lack of education and a lack of, how can I say, best practice that those persons can refer to, and in order to project themselves and be actually attracted by those. So that's what we've seen with this program, and we have, it's a broad, say, quite a few women into managerial positions that we didn't anticipate to be at start of the program. And it was not, they were not forced, okay, don't get me wrong.
And if I add something also, Sirat, we also had this problem of that there are not that many women who feel or who are candidating for managerial posts. And this, one of the reasons is that we just had one type of management, and which is very typical male style of management, with working long hours, being present, hyper connectivity, the things I've mentioned in the slides. So what we want to work on now is to change that vision that there is only one management style, but to say no, there can be different management styles, and everyone can come with its own characteristics and its own style in a certain way. So working on what is the image of management in your culture, in your institution, that's one thing which needs to be done. And another thing is also what we noticed is that there was a lack of confidence in the candidate procedures and the way people are selected. So we often heard people saying, anyway, I'm not candidating because it's already decided. I already know the candidate, the selection is already made. So no way that I'm going to invest in candidating. So these two things, I think this are things you can work on to install confidence in the procedures, and also to make people feel comfortable that they can have their own style.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I put the percentage of the number of researchers and the licensees in Tunisia. So the number of women outnumber the percentage of men. We don't have like a problem of what you said before. I would like to ask, what are the criteria to do such a study? So are there some parameters? Women are very present in the workforce in Tunisia. So we have the problem, for example, in the position of leadership due to some traditional patriarchal mentality. So I would like, in the scientific point of view, how can we evaluate the situation of gender equality plan, how we do it?
I would like to start addressing the Mahdi's question on whether we evaluate if we need gender equality plan, if our numbers, the representation of numbers seems okay.
I think it's difficult to evaluate. I think the numbers is one side of the coin, okay,
Yes.
which is really the diversity. I think the other side of the coin is inclusion. Okay, you may have a great diversity, but no inclusion, no, let's say, voice to say in the decision process, in the way you, in the culture, in the way you operate, and so on. So I think it's really, I mean, from my point of view, to evaluate this balance between both. Okay, and I think some of the numbers you've shown there in terms, you know, women's representation, and we have the same. We have a big site in Casablanca, in Morocco, was actually more than 2,000, and that's one of the sites where we have the highest level of engagement of a gender, let's say, a balance. We're nearly at 50-50, but that's also the site where we have the highest level of women manager across almost all sites, as far as I know, actually. So on a very broad scale, we have more than 50% of our let's say, managers who are women in Casablanca, and to the executive level as well. So it's an interesting discussion, but I think we have developed the inclusive culture that comes with this diversity as well.
Right. Thank you, Stefan. I'm afraid I will continue with the questions later because we have to move forward to the second part of this round discussion, and where, again, each speaker will share 5 minutes. Their maybe challenges, what do's and don'ts they may have faced that they would like to share, and of course their takeout message that they would like to share with us. So Jane, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to share, I just have one slide to share with you. Okay. I think that's coming up there. Okay, so some of these we have discussed already, but just to, I suppose, share Teagasc's experience to date in terms of developing our gender values and developing our gender equality plan, and then beginning the implementation of our actions. So these are just some of the challenges and insights that that we've come across. So I suppose the biggest challenge that we've had is in relation to time and resources, as I'm sure many organisations have, and we've kind of discussed that briefly there. And that a real challenge is ensuring that gender equality is a priority for the organisation, but is also kept as a priority. Because developing and implementing a gender equality plan and maintaining a focus on building a gender equality culture within the organisation, it does require a lot of time and resources, and realistically, it's a journey that will take many years to achieve. And for us, participating in the Gender Smart project has enabled us to be able to take on a temporary resource to focus on our gender equality activities and to build momentum. And this has been hugely positive for us in terms of making progress. But in a similar manner to Cindy and Sirad, we have had, we really rely on volunteers and trying to engage and leverage resources right across the organisation in order to be able to implement activities and to, I suppose, maintain that momentum. The second thing is that using the approach that I outlined earlier to develop our gender values has given us a really good awareness of our culture. And we're very aware that our senior staff are male dominated and that this is unlikely to change in the short term. So we have to ensure that we engage senior male managers in our gender initiatives and to continuously seek their support. And we're very fortunate in Teagasc that our Teagasc senior managers are very supportive of the Gender Smart project and also the implementation of the actions in our gender equality plan. From our experience, we would recommend getting as many people as possible involved in activities, because people are more inclined to support something that they themselves have had a stake in creating. And using participatory approaches in our workshops has been really helpful to encourage some real discussion, to kind of generate those points of frustration and also to generate ideas for action, and to get buy-in then and create awareness as well of gender equality and also diversity and inclusion. And as I mentioned briefly there, the approach that we've taken in Teagasc is to create a small core team of 3 people who have the responsibility for leading and organising the initiatives and the projects. And that team then is supported and guided by a task force with 16 members of middle and senior managers representing all of the key divisions within Teagasc. And then after that, we try to leverage volunteers across the organisation to get involved in implementing the actions. I think the theme of this year's International Women's Day is very apt, choose to challenge. And I think we really need to make a conscious effort to choose to challenge within our organisations and to call out gender inequality when we see it. And for example, within Teagasc, we have been choosing to challenge and have challenged a number of symbols in Teagasc. For example, until recently, all new buildings and meeting rooms were named after men. And 2 years ago, we had our first meeting room that was named after a woman. So that was a symbol of change. And on this slide here, I've just shown some photographs from our annual reports, which would be quite typical of photographs that would be produced in Teagasc. So these here are used to launch a major event or a new publication, and as you can see that they feature all men. But what's happening now within the organisation is that many people are calling this out, and we're a lot more conscious of these types of symbols and the need to ensure that photographs, conference programmes and events are much more gender balanced. But it does need to be called out. There are a lot of unconscious biases, and we all have biases, but we do need constant reminding and calling out where things are not right in order to be able to bring about change. So I do recommend choosing to challenge. And we are going to experience pushback and resistance, but I think a moderate amount of friction is positive because if there's no friction, it probably means that very little is actually changing. And then lastly, I think it's important to acknowledge and appreciate that achieving gender equality and bringing about a gender equality culture, it is a long journey, and it's certainly going to go beyond the lifetime of the Gender Smart project. And as Esther said, the Supera project too. So we need to acknowledge that and appreciate that, and to celebrate and highlight small wins and achievements along the way. And just to remember that it will require constant effort and action. So thanks, Pan.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much for these personal reflections. So Stefan?
Yeah, I think for this round, I will go back on the title of this discussion, which is how to design a gender sensitive culture. Okay, and I'll just pick up on a few words to share my personal experience. So the first word is culture. Okay, culture is something that you can only change if you change it at the leadership level. So for me, one of the key learning is that you need to engage the top leadership, and you need to make it a business item. Okay, to my reflection a bit earlier, you don't need to track that separately to the business. It is the business. Your people are your business, your diversity, your inclusion is your business. Okay, and it should be owned by everybody in the organization. And if it's not owned by the top management, you will never succeed. Okay, so first, make it owned by the top management, go back there and fight. And I think to Jane's point, there needs to be sometimes a bit of tension there, because tension is sane. Okay, and make it business related. So same priority than the business, same mobilization, same kind of resources allocation, same kind of time dedicated, time in the agenda, on the calls or whatever. Okay, don't finish on this 25th item on the meeting being, oh, and we need to talk about diversity. Okay, because we never cover it. Go back, make it at start, because it's as important as the rest. Okay, if not more. So that's my first learning. Second, it's gender sensitive, and I think sensitive is the word. Okay, it is sensitive. It's a topic which is difficult. Okay, so it requires lots of education. Don't don't underestimate the time needed and how brave you need to initiate, but also for people to join and to really jump into that conversation. Okay, it is difficult, so take time, educate, make it conversational. Okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all. A context in Nordics is very different from a context in South Africa, very different from a context in Southern Europe or in any other places on the globe. Okay, and every time you have to be right. okay, and right for that environment, for that culture, for this discussion. So that's a complex discussion. Take time. It's not an easy discussion, and then actually for people to truly own it, I think I would say make it real. Okay, don't avoid the tough discussions. Okay, and let the people practice it. There are plenty of day-to-day small things, from one comment, from one word, from one behavior, from one email, one image. I mean, you've seen the pictures from Jane. I mean, all those things are small things, okay? But they're all part of it, okay? And make it real. And we all have this ability to pick up, to react, to make a difference by just, you know, not letting those things happen, okay? And I think as part of making it real, one of the things I've seen is, in order for driving gender, okay, it's easier to drive gender when you drive diversity as a whole, other kind of diversity, not just the gender diversity on its own. Why? Because gender, and I know it's not exactly true, but gender is some kind of binary, okay? Men, women. Therefore, if you push women, then you have to slow down men, okay? And you create those kind of tension. If you bring the other kind of diversity from a culture standpoint, from a language standpoint, from an origin standpoint, from, you know, a sexual orientation standpoint, from an age standpoint, okay? You have a completely different discussion, okay? You avoid that face-to-face. You don't avoid the conversation, but you avoid the kind of confrontational element. Again, I'm not against tension when it is constructive, okay? But I think my take is talking about, let's say, diversity in a broad sense helps to put actually gender on the top of the agenda, because you can get it a bit more easily than sometimes with this kind of tension. And that's it.
Thank you, Stefan. Really inspiring conclusion. Thank you. Esther?
Yes, I share just 2 slides. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. So about the resistances, since the beginning of the process, during the very first phase of a self-assessment of the state of our university regarding gender equality policies and practices, we have been able to collect many forms of resistances within the organization. But while about the institutional level, there have been no explicit obstacles to the development of our work, revealing a good organizational culture. The hardest resistances have been individual or involved about single individuals involved in various forms in these early stages of the project. Just some examples of this kind of resistances. For example, resistances about the gender equality as a theme and its specific key contents. For example, the risk that an excessive attention to gender equality does not give due consideration to the most correct parameter of merit, for example, regardless of gender, which in itself would therefore be a false problem, as there would be no real discrimination at UNICA from this point of view, or the risk that an excessive attention on gender equality, and in particular on the rebalancing of women's opportunities with respect to men through positive actions, for example, creates ghettos, and if anything, exalt the vulnerability of women as a weaker sex in need of additional help. Or another kind of resistances are focused on the denial of the problem. The problem does not exist. An explicit rejection of a feminist, for example, considered as an obsolete ideology without any value. Also, refusal of any definition of gender considered as a form of ideological categorization completely useless. If gender asymmetry exists, it is a natural consequence of biological differences. This is another kind of resistance, for example. And for example, the denials of changeability. These are resistances connected not so much to the recognition of the problem of the importance of gender equality, but about the importance of the solutions to deal with this kind of issue. For example, the perception of that's how things are, while underestimating the institution's own responsibility, feelings of passivity, for example, the fear of reverse discrimination, or another resistance is that it is not a problem at the workplace, but rather an individual or familiar one. The real problems of inequality are related to other more urgent issues like LGBT rights, a different distribution of academic power in the Italian territory, and so on. So a perception of disorientation with respect to these issues related to the lack of information on what can be done on an individual and on a structural level. And the result is a sense of detachment with respect to the institution, which translates into generalized distrust and inaction. And this has been a very big problem to deal with at the very first stage of our work. But we have learned some key lessons so far, because detecting the resistances encountered has been a useful starting point to understand where and how to focus our strategies, to develop our approach, starting from the gender equality plan. And there are maybe 3 points that are very important. The first one is the participation, starting with the involvement of the hub of our allies, made up of representatives from all disciplinary areas, including STEM disciplines, and from all sectors and directions, from top administrative positions to student representatives, and so on. The second one is the co-learning approach, collecting best practices from other national and international universities in order to have benchmarks and to create indicators that are very effective for evaluating progress in gender equality development, starting from the gender equality plan. And the third one is like the comment of Lut just before, the co-working approach, organizing, for example, Fab Labs, training courses, and this very moment we have training courses for PhD students, for example, on these issues, mainly targeted to the teaching and administrative staff and to the student body in order to focus on specific issues related to gender equality within the university, because the university is at the same time a workplace, but also a high educational actor, and to reach a set of sustainable actions proposals together. Because at the end, the JEP is a process, gender equality plan is a process, not an end point, but a trigger point for a lasting, widespread, and shared systemic gender-sensitive change in academia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. And the last speaker for the second round, Cindy.
Yeah, I probably will be repeating some of the key messages because they were already very rich.
That's okay.
I agree with the other speakers about the involvement of top management. And I also totally agree with the importance of having participatory bottom-up. So I guess you need to find the right mixture of top-down and bottom-up, and really play with these two ways of functioning throughout the whole process. I think it's also important that, like for leadership as a Gender Smart project or any other project, that the leadership is taken on by someone of the top management. We have it with Magali in the person of Magali. And I think this is key, because this gives a message that the top management is behind this project, is leading this project. So this is a key aspect I think that you have to take in consideration if you organize gender equality through a project. Yeah, on the participatory bottom-up, it's important to get people adhere to what you are developing, to the guide of inclusive behaviors, etc. So you need to involve all staff in this to make sure that they accept these type of products and they want to use it, they adhere to it. It's a kind of, it's a cultural aspect as well, that you have to see how do we decide and how do we work in our enterprise and adapt to this. In Serrat, participatory approaches have become very common and since the last 5 years, so we really have to opt for this in our way of working in our project. It was also mentioned that gender equality culture should be a strategic priority. It should not be just the last item of the agenda. Totally agree with this. And I would add that it should be a movement. It should be transversal in the whole organization. And it should not just be the HR department, which is running this or which is being mandated to do this. Del mentioned also the importance of business, but I think that we have to cover and make sure that it's a transversal strategic priority. I also think that you should have a very good and well-constructed business case. So don't forget about the why side. Why are you doing this? What are the inequalities in your organization? What are the problems you're covering? This to give it a more scientific approach, and also to avoid a militant position, which is very few people appreciate these militant positions, and it's very difficult to get men on board if you are being seen as a feminist project. So really kind of objectivize the whole situation and talk about the situation and how the approach, the scientific approach that you will give to it. Stefan mentioned also open the gender dialogue, open it to diversity and inclusion, as it is less confronting. Totally agree with this as well. But I would just add on this, but make sure that there are still specific actions for gender equality, because we might, gender equality is the first item that might drop out. So, okay, open it up, but be sure that there are some specific things that continue to be done for gender equality. And then maybe to finish off, I would say that inclusive behavior is really a competence, it's a skill, and it's a choice, it's a way of being. So everybody can be more inclusive. Don't get into blaming, but get into responsibilizing people throughout the whole organization. And tackle inclusiveness at the individual level, individual behavior level, but also at the institutional level. Look at the procedures. Is our way of functioning, our procedures inclusive, or are already there are some biases and discrimination, things which discriminate? And then, of course, as mentioned by Stefan as well, continuous training, awareness raising is so important to evolve our behaviors to much more, so that we behave in a more conscious way. So thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those who are still with us. I know we are a few minutes late, but I will directly go to our questions in the chat box. So we have one that Patricia asked, where the gender equality often intersects with other very critical issues at organizational level. For example, unbalanced workload, unhealthy competition, complex governance issues, and how the participating organizations are coping with that. Has the work done on gender equality contributed somehow to address and solve such issues? Again, anyone like to answer that? So we see that there are other similar challenges within an organization, and has the work around gender equality contributed to solve these issues?
Maybe I can just say something inside Serrat.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, inside Serrat, Gender Smart is being taken as an example to also tackle other type of discriminations. So our management wish to get inspiration or inspire itself to open up the dialogue to other forms of discrimination. But we still have to, for the moment, we tackle different type of discrimination separately, and I think we still have to work on how looking at this intersectionality and what approaches and what methods to tackle this together. But we are in the beginner stage, I would say, for this.
And I may add that when you're dealing with gender inequality, because you're working on your unconscious bias and your own discrimination, this lens also applied to other problems, issues. That means you get the chance to solve other issues without really knowing them, that you do. So let's see more further questions. Questions to Esther. The resistance takes roots from not understanding why it is important to have the gender balance. How do you explain the main motivation behind the process? Next question.
One way that we believe to be useful is to prove it with facts. Gender equality, also in terms, for example, of reaching top positions, is not only a question of ethics and social justice, and of a substantial citizenship, which are also fundamental values that an agent who produces knowledge should always pursue. But it is also an improvement of the general performances of any economic and social actor, and the university is also this. The inclusion of gender and also in intersectional key is also economically convenient and useful and urgent and necessary, because a rich scientific literature documents how to keep half of the population out of working positions, even at the top position, is a tremendous loss in terms of productivity, development, innovation, general socio-economic well-being. In Italy, it's called the factor D as donne, women, which also explains the difficulty in overcoming the recurring cases of economic crisis, even beyond the pandemic, because it's a very old problem in Italy. So literature, numbers, cases are useful tools to demonstrate that the equality, that gender equality is convenient for everyone, not just for women.
That's a strong argument indeed. If we don't have any other question in the chat box, I would like to maybe wrap up a bit what we said and thank the participants and speakers for being here. That was really, really insightful and practical from my experience. So we've seen that how the involvement of people, top management position, is one way to go further to gender equality. And today we've seen how raising awareness within the organization through participatory approach, training, using communication as our model, it's really important. And of course, defining gender equality values, promoting them in the organization, it's an important step, as mentioned for many speakers. And we should also have in mind, Stefan, I will say unique approach, because it's not a common thing to say the involvement of men and having a constant relationship with them, training them, keep them involved and engaged. So I will really stand to this point, as it's not a woman's issue. And of course, it's a long journey. It's something that takes time, and we have to be persistent and speak up about gender equality issues in our organizations. We have to make it a priority. I'm looking at my notes. I think it's important also to mention how we should deal with resistance and be ready for that. It's something that all of us, every partner around the world who is working towards gender equality, face that usual. So that's for me. Magali, if you would like to make a closing message, thank you so much for being here with us. The floor is yours, Magali.
Thank you, Panayota. Thank you all. In fact, I hope that this roundtable was useful for you. And in the next months, maybe it will give you the opportunity to build a gender equality plan and to have more practical insights to build that gender equality plan. And I will finish with the motto of the Gender Smart project, that equality benefits all. So have a nice end of afternoon and see you soon, I hope. Thank you for all the
Thank you
panelists
for
to be
having
there
me.
with us. Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.